Hello! Welcome back to my channel. I'm Julianne and I'm here today with a very special guest, my partner Nick.
Hello.
Why have I invited Nick on my channel today? Well, I thought that we could talk about fairies because Nick here has a comic on Kickstarter at the moment called FairyFare, which is about two sisters who get caught up in the world of fairy magic after they sign up to an app which basically allows them to grant wishes using fairy magic, even though they are not fairies. And yeah, trouble ensues. Is that fair to say?
Trouble and comedy, yes.
Yeah.
Alternates between silly antics and deadly danger.
That is the fairy way, yeah.
Yeah, it seems playful and will steadily become less playful. That's probably not a huge spoiler for any fans of fairy mythology out there.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that is why I like fairies. I think I've just become more and more into the concept of fairies in fiction, thanks to Holly Black, I will admit. Because she's written, what are we up to, like 7 fairy books now? No, 8. Oh, I can't count, there's so many of them. And her fairies are super dark, and I love it. Super, super, super dark. I would say that the FairyFare fairies are not quite so dark.
give them time, give them time.
Not quite so much murder, I feel. There might be some murder later on, maybe. I don't know.
Spoilers.
The Kickstarter is just for the first issue. It's a 4-part series, isn't it?
Yes, this will be 4 issues by me and Rosie Alexander.
If you've seen Nick's previous comic with Rosie, The Little Depths of Watson Tower, you'll know that her art is just stunning. Or if you just look at her Instagram, which I'll link in the description box, you will know how amazing her art is. There's also plenty of it on the Kickstarter page as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, worth checking it out. Also, I made the video for the Kickstarter, and it's very good and funny and involves Nick doing some like slapstick comedy. So
yeah, it's a talent I'm just discovering now. The sight of me flailing around in the garden with a spade is the most innately hilarious thing in the world.
It's so funny. It's so funny. Anyway, it's probably funnier because I know you and it's you doing it, but still, you know.
Judge for yourself. Watch the video on the Kickstarter page, judge for yourself, and then pledge.
So anyway, back to the topic of fairies. Why did you decide to write a story involving fairies? You've done sci-fi before, and you've done some fantasy themes with some mythological creatures before. Your previous comic on Kickstarter, And It Snowed, featured a Jack Frost.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I like the creatures. I like the sort of general urban fantasy people against sort of weird creatures in a modern setting thing. I've done a lot of it. I'm currently scheduled to do more of it, and yeah, I think I find that the setup of sort of person trapped in a sort of, I guess, trick or deal with a magical creature is one of the most fun things to do with them. And yeah, I've got a lot of stories which I've sort of written and never finished, or written and got close to doing something with, involving deals with the devil, but ultimately fairies are just more fun, really. It's just a bit, it just ends up being more interesting to have fairies as these little mischievous sprites. They're just more colourful and more fun than, you know, some Satan figure with his tridents. Which I have got a comic coming up that actually has a deal with the devil in it. But yeah, I like the sort of, the way they can both be mischievous and fun and have this sort of deal-making dark side, which appeals to me. Especially because it was going to be drawn by Rosie, so this was probably not going to be one of the ones where I want it to be, you know, bleak as hell, shadowy as hell, where hiding in alleyways talking to the devil who's wearing a trench coat and smoking or something. So yeah, it wasn't going to be one of those comics. I have written those comics, and I assure you I will again. But on this occasion I wanted it to be, you know, bright, colourful, sprightly, and maybe later in the story, deceptively evil.
Excellent. I think that, I mean, as I say, that's what I like about fairies as well, that moral ambiguity. I think Holly Black does this really well because she kind of has, you typically have like the Seelie Court and the Unseelie Court, but actually in Holly Black's world, the Seelie Court is kind of worse because they have this appearance of being all nice and beautiful and perfect and kind, but actually they're awful. And don't get me wrong, the Unseelie Court is also evil. However, they're a bit more practical. And you kind of, all the ugliness is kind of embraced, but in a sort of like, you know, we know all these things are bad, so we have this system set up to control them, kind of a way. Holly kind of explores a lot why the fairies aren't going around killing all the humans. You know, like there's a lot of restrictions that fairies place on other fairies to stop them doing that, because that would be bad. But at the same time, they're very manipulative and they like to toy with humans. And yeah.
Plus, you know, if it's the Sealy course and they're ultimately well intentioned, I guess that just makes it a bigger twist when they screw you.
Yeah.
Again, that's what I like.
Yeah, definitely. I like stories where you have to kind of figure out who's right and who's wrong, and it's not immediately clear, because that's what the world is like. And I think fairies give us a really useful tool to explore that, because there are all these rules about how to interact with them, and they're very powerful, but then they also have certain weaknesses like iron, and in some stories they can't cross rivers and things like that. You know, they get sick in urban environments. You know, it's it's fun times. So, do you have any comic influences? Now we've done a bit talking about fairies. You know, are there any particular comics that inspired this comic?
Again, it's probably a lot of urban fantasy. I mean, I have the classic one, I guess, which a lot of people, especially a lot of British people, go to for urban fantasy, is the old John Constantine Hellblazer, who I don't actually know have the cultural background to know if he was the original alley-lurking, trench-coat-wearing, chain-smoking London urban wizard, but he's got to be one of the sort of Rosetta Stones of the subgenre, I feel. So yeah, there's a lot of Hellblazer, although this is definitely a bit brighter and shinier than Hellblazer. And I think, I don't know, I was reading Sandman actually last year, and Sandman's also quite good for this sort of... I mean, the thing that Sandman does well, the thing that Neil Gaiman's incredibly good at, is this sort of natural mythological feel, this sort of sense that this is even if it's actually something he's made up. Yeah, well, yeah, to the extent you can't really tell whether it's something he's made up or not, the sense that this is this sort of mythological story where someone does something and is made to pay a high price for their hubris, or a creature mischievously screws them over, and it always feels very, very classic and very folksy, folklore-esque. Folkloresy? One of those. In short, yeah, an early Vertigo for hardcore comic fans out there looking. Yeah, a lot of urban fantasy, which tends to mean a lot of early Vertigo. Although early Vertigo is quite well known for its, I guess you'd call it, dark, murky colouring. Sort of Vertigo colouring is traditionally quite sort of lots of dark greens and dark browns and black, obviously. Hard murk down in the mud. And obviously, as we said earlier, and as you'll see immediately if you go to look at any of the FairyFare pages, we have very much emerged from the mud to stand in the daylight for Rosie's heart. In fact, we've possibly gone beyond the daylight and into some sort of neon art exhibition. It's pretty bright.
When was that? Was that like the 80s, 90s?
Well, early Vertigo? Yeah, late 80s, early 90s.
That corresponds pretty well with when with kind of like the development of urban fantasy, particularly the kind featuring fairies in literature as well. I think it was a whole thing at that time, you know, where there's lots of stuff that I want to catch up on. I haven't got around to reading. I have like lots of books by Charles DeLint, for example, who wrote lots of urban fantasy. You know, that I just haven't got around to reading yet. There's just a huge backlog of stuff. A lot of it was influences on people who have written fairy stuff more recently. So yeah, I think we've come at it from different directions: comics versus books.
Yeah, that's very much the core dynamic of the relationship.
Yeah. Comics versus books. He recommends me comics. I occasionally try to get him to read a book, and then he doesn't.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, I recommend, on the subject of fairies, I recommended The Good Fairies of New York to you ages ago, and you haven't read it yet.
Also true.
Yeah. The best part is, it actually even has an introduction by Neil Gaiman.
He is all over this stuff. Old Neil. He's every time something vaguely on brand happens, he just appears, I think.
Yeah, I read an anthology of short stories last year, which was witch themed, and Neil Gaiman was like the headline author on the cover, and he just wrote a poem. I mean, not to underplay the writing of poetry. This is
denigrating poetry, isn't it? I mean, I know this isn't really a poetry channel, but let's not start a war.
Considering it was the shortest thing in the book, and he was like the headliner, it was a bit, not fair.
Poetry fans, please still back my Kickstarter.
Poetry fans, please still watch my channel. I do occasionally read poetry, but yeah, it was fine. But you know, I didn't feel like it justified him being the headliner. Except, of course, he's Neil Gaiman. You know, but if you bought the book and you thought this is going to have a Neil Gaiman short story in it, you'd be quite disappointed to find out it was a poem, wouldn't you?
I'm not going anywhere near this. Live grenades, to be honest. You can start your war with Neil Gaiman and the poets on your own. I'll be over here. In my half of the screen.
So, is there anything else that you want to say about FairyFare or fairies in general before we go on to quickfire questions?
Oh, it's a game show, I see.
Yeah,
please back FairyFare. It's a really good comic. There are review quotes at the top of the Kickstarter page to confirm from independent sources that it is in fact a really good comic. Rosie's produced some amazing artwork. Not just the colours, although it is hard to forget about those, so they do tend to come up quite quickly. But yeah, there's some beautiful drawings of fantasy creatures and stuff, and she's also very good at, I think has particularly developed at becoming really, really good at, in this last bit of her work, the sort of character cartooning, sort of facial expressions. There's a lot of really good sort of massive, well-drawn facial expressions in FairyFare.
Yeah, they're fabulous. I love her. I love how expressive her art is.
Yes, so yes, lots of good stuff in FairyFare. Please consider pledging. You can get the PDF of the comic for a mere £2 if you don't want to pay more than £2, or if not, that many other tiers are available, including other comics I've done, art prints from other artists inspired by the concept of FairyFare, that sort of thing.
Brilliant, great.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah, and I've read it and it's great. Obviously, you may think I am biased, so you know, please do go view these reviews as well.
Another independent, unbiased reviewer, everybody.
And if someone is watching this months or years later, they will be able to buy FairyFare issue #1, hopefully at some point in the future, the rest of the series, on your website, nickbryan.com, right?
Yes, if you, as of probably, hopefully, around late October, early November this year, 2021, FairyFare issue 1 should be up on my website shop, which currently is the Nick Bryan Gumroad page. But whatever it is, it should be linked to nickbryan.com.
Great. Okay, right, quick fire questions, which may not be so quick. It depends how much we get into these. Okay, so, best Disney fairy?
Does it count as a valid answer? I can't remember any of them except Tinkerbell.
Yes.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, just about. There we go, Tinkerbell. Obviously, for me, it's Maleficent, because, you know, she's evil. She turns into a big dragon. It's great.
I honestly didn't realise she counted.
Yeah, she's totally a fairy. I mean,
Okay.
in the original Sleeping Beauty, she's a fairy, and I think in the Maleficent film, she's like definitely actually a fairy in the beginning. So you know, definitely a fairy. Okay, best non-fairy mythological creature. You have a Minotaur in the comic.
I don't know. I'm still quite attached to the devil himself. Does he count?
Yeah, he can
Alright,
count.
fine.
Yeah,
We'll
yeah.
have him.
Yeah. For me, dragons again. You know, they also fly. They breathe fire. They have hordes of stuff. I have hordes of stuff. You know. There are many great books in which dragons play a good role. I really like the Narsa Samsara series, in which the dragons are really into stories and like being told stories. I love that idea. And yeah, I relate to dragons a lot. If a fairy could grant you a wish, what would it be?
Give me a second to think about that.
Okay, I'll give you my answer. Fully automated luxury communism. Or at least fix climate change. But like, not like instantly.
Oh, we're going big, are we?
We're going big.
It's not like FairyFare fairies, which just turn up and fetch your pizza for you.
No, we're going
Okay.
go hard or go home, right? I'm like, but not like instantly fix climate change. Like, make the humans work together to fix climate change, which I feel is an achievable fairy goal.
Surely,
you know?
if fairies turned up and did this for you, they'd fix climate change for you and then burn down your house or something.
Yeah, but they can burn down my house if they fix climate change. I'd take the hit for the team.
Very altruistic of you.
Yeah, I like, you know, I would. It would be sad. I'd be very sad about our house and all the stuff in it, but climate change being fixed, prob's worth it.
Not my comics.
There you go. You could wish for your Kickstarter to be fully funded.
I mean, it seems a bit small and petty compared to fix climate change, to be honest. Yeah, I'm going to fix wealth inequality because I now feel I have to do something like that in order to see you ethically on a par with you.
Okay, right. Okay. How about if a fairy could grant you a small wish, what would it be?
Yeah, then I'll take funding the Kickstarter.
Okay, cool.
Or Or to be honest, if they could just draw my next comic for me, that'd be great. It would save me a lot of hassle in terms of, you know, paying an artist, and it would be interesting to see what that looks like.
I would really wish to never have to clean the house again, for the house to just magically stay clean. Although if then enough of Fairies going to burn it down to fix climate change, like, that would be a bit pointless. So, you know, it would have to only be in the circumstance in which there was only going to be a small wish.
I didn't realise these wishes had a shared cinematic universe, to be honest.
Yeah. Okay. Right, your favourite fairy tale?
Once Upon a Time.
As in the TV show?
Yes.
You know,
It's a classic.
traditional fairy tale?
It is every fairy tale.
I mean, yes, but it's also terrible. Good in places,
That is
but
cool to Once Upon a Time.
good in places, but largely terrible. Yeah. I mean, we watched all of it, so
All 7 seasons, including the last one, which was actually terrible.
every single episode. I feel like we did I say it's terrible. We did enjoy it overall. It was just that one season that was particularly bad.
Oh, don't oversell it. There were other bad seasons.
There were other mediocre seasons.
Anyway, I don't know. I do enjoy Red Riding Hood just for the grizzly people eating. That's good fun.
It is very grisly.
Yes, it is.
I did love the Roald Dahl version when I was a child. When I was a kid, my favourite was Cinderella, although I prefer the Beauty and the Beast in Disney terms. Cinderella, Disney, don't care. But as a story to read, I always preferred Cinderella.
Yeah.
Which, you know, does have fairy. It does have a fairy, you know, an unambiguously good fairy.
Nice.
As well. Although, when in the really, 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 really original versions of Cinderella, the ugly sisters do get their eyes pecked out, which is, you know, not so nice. And also, like, they cut off toes and things to try to fit in the shoes. It's very grisly. So I feel like that the story itself gets some more ambiguity.
That's a common theme in fairy tales, isn't it?
Yeah.
The increased level of grisliness the further back you go.
Yeah. And finally, if you had fairy wings and you could fly somewhere right now, where would you go?
Well, it's difficult because obviously I can't name the usual tropical destinations because I don't really enjoy direct sunlight. I mean, at this point I've been indoors for so long, but I would always rather go to a nice party with all my friends than any specific destination. I have no particular holiday wishes. I just quite like to be, you know, out and about.
So you'd fly around, pick up all your friends and put them in one place?
Yes, and COVID would not be a concern for whatever reason.
Yeah, to be fair, I'd probably do that too, but probably on a nice beach. Because I haven't seen the sea in a very long time and I miss the sea. So, there we go. Thank you very much for watching our video about fairies. Hope you enjoyed our little rambles. Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you'd like to see more from me. And back next Kickstarter.
Yes.
Go on his website and buy his comics. Thank you again. You'll see me again soon. Bye.
Bye.